everybody, it's Steve Healthy Napier. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today, I think we're starting a new topic, and that topic is going to be subtleties and nuances on the change grid. So I'm going to exercise your guys' abilities to read, I'm going to say secondary intersections. And we'll see how you do with all that. But first, I wanted to open it up to just general questions. Are any of you doing anything that around the subject of tension management that you want to throw out as a question for us to explore, or not so much?
Me, not so much. I just love watching the show.
Okay, listen, that's great. Yeah, maybe I should produce merch. People can wear Change Grids T-shirts around.
Oh,
There
I
you
would.
go.
Yeah, well, if nothing else, I should have one.
Yeah, it says, "Where do you fall?"
Where do you fall on the change grid? Yeah, he's hysterical. All right, anyway, yeah, the subject, I want to talk about subtleties and nuances, because it's one thing for us to look at a change grid and kind of read it layer by layer. So if, for example, I said, well, let's talk about coordinates, I don't know, make it 9 and 11. Yeah, that'll be screwball-y enough. Okay, 9 and 11. Well, as you work your way through each layer, there's stuff that you could say. Like on this layer, I could say, well, you plotted at coordinates 9 and 11. And so let's just look at your perceptions. What led you to this spot? Well, for whatever reason, this particular activity is something that you view yourself as being quite prepared to do. And 9 is nothing to be embarrassed about, but there you acknowledge there's room for you to grow further in your knowledge and your skill and your experience. You also gave this an 11. For the perceived challenge, and 11 is super high on the scale. In fact, we would discourage anyone from ever using 12 unless they're truly in a life or death kind of a situation, a truly impossible kind of situation. So 11 is basically about as high as you can get. Tell me about that. And toss it to the client to kind of fill in a little bit of the blanks. And obviously I know what the activity is. I don't in this case because we're winging it, but I can engage them in some very meaningful dialogue just looking at this layer where their perceptions intersect on the change grid. Fair enough for me to say that you guys would have no difficulty doing exactly what I just did, right?
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, this is as straightforward as the grid usage is going to get. All you're doing is
Yep.
telling them what they already told you. This is my ability. This is my challenge. Okay, how does that feel? Fill in the blanks for me. Tell me more about that. We can all do that. So no worries there at all. Now, we then move on to another layer and say, well, there's a little bit more to it than that. So let's take a look at one of the layers of the change grid. I might have even shown them this and say the change grid is built of many different layers that encompass many, many models of human behavior and understanding dating back perhaps thousands of years. So let's kind of take a look at this layer by layer and see what we can do with it. So I could then move on. Well, I would have done this and then go on to the 5 levels of productive tension. So humans experience 5 levels of productive tension: stress, power, empathy, and apathy. And which one you happen to be experiencing at a particular time is based on these 2 perceptions you have. So let's go back to where you were. You said your ability was a 9 and the challenge is an 11. Well, that puts you at the power response state. And here's what the power response state means. Now, to do that, you guys would be pulling out probably your quick reference guide if you're not actually sharing it with them as a kind of a keepsake. But you could certainly say to them, so while all these things that we've just described about power are certainly true, the intensity with which you're experiencing them is going to change based on where you are on the change grid. So being in power very far this way, which we happen to call out grid, feels very different than still being in power, but very far in grid. And so then I would share with them some of those characteristics of power and see if they resonate with them. So as far as these activities are concerned, again, you're at 9, 11. What would you guys say about 9 and 11?
Very driven.
They're very driven to do whatever it happens to be. I mean, in fact, we haven't shown them yet, but they're on that edge of the danger zone. And
Right.
so, right. So what else can we tell them about their location?
They're very anxious to see a result.
All right. And tell me where you're getting that from. The anxious
Well, very challenging, but they have a lot of abilities. So they feel that they're capable of handling this.
part.
But it's a very challenging situation which requires action.
And so this could very well be like when athletes are about to start a game and they're getting themselves all kind of psyched in to whatever it is that needs to be done. So yeah, it's a very preparatory kind of thing because maybe the contest isn't afoot. Now, if they're there and the contest is afoot, what do you think about this location for athletes in the throes of play? Good place,
Intensity.
not so bad.
It's a good place.
It's a good place because they recognize they can't underestimate the challenge, and they really shouldn't inflate their perceived ability. They got to recognize that like any other athletic pursuit, there's room to grow and records to beat and all that sort of stuff. So not a
The,
bad.
the question that occurs to me is what are they telling themselves?
Well, and that's it. So we always want to throw it back to them and say, so tell me what parts of what I've just suggested resonate with you. Tell me more about that. What does it feel like for you, depending on the subject. So yeah, absolutely right, Daniel. This is a tool of conversation. We got to get them, filling in their half. So yeah. All right, but my point is that you guys are all, I believe, totally equipped to take the little quick reference guide as purely as a refresher of all the different characteristics that each one of these levels of tension carries within it, and share some glimmers of that with a client and then throw it back to them. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yes,
Thank you. All right, so now
everyone's here.
we're going to go to the next one. And the next one is this layer is about intensity. So I could say to them, again, I'd probably use it as my transition. Again, not all places in power are created equally. Depending on where you are, you could be feeling these qualities in very different ways. And mostly it's all about the intensity with which these things that we've used as descriptors are going to hold true. So you plotted at coordinates 9 and 11. You're right on the border between a sixth of the degree and a seventh degree intensity as far as this goes on. So these things that we've described for power are feeling really powerful for you. Interesting, we're using that word here because you are still in power, but that's it. It feels like this is something that's testing you and you're testing yourself. It's very intense. What else might you guys want to share with your client about that location as far as intensity goes?
I would say beware, just be conscious of your intensity and make sure that it's appropriate for the situation.
Excellent. And I might have even educated them and just said, seventh for intensity is awful intense. In fact, you can see there's only certain a small set of circumstances under which a human can even handle seventh degree intensity. So, 6 drops off, 5 does the full thing, but there's a reason why this band is smaller because nobody can handle 6th degree stress, let alone 7th degree stress. 5 is enough to make you feel like you're in a life or death situation. So,
Well, if you're a linebacker,
yeah.
isn't that where you want to be?
All right.
Thinking, I don't know a lot about football, but that was what occurred
Yeah,
to me.
yeah, right, right, which kind of reinforces what we were saying about athletic performance. This is not a bad place at all for athletes to perform. To Kathy's point, you just want to be cautious. It's kind of like, out here, not only does your performance suffer, but you're more prone to injuring yourself or others. And so there's a certain level of intensity that no longer serves someone well. But the thought that at 9 and 11, there they are, feeling as though their ability is really being put to the test, I think that's probably both helpful and accurate. Now, again, perfectly, we might say we'd like them to really be at 10-10. But look how close they are, one little step away from the ideal location.
Is that the inverted U that you just referenced, T? You know, that your
That would be
performance will fall off?
right. But if you're talking about the inverted U theory, like about ear keys and what was his name?
Well, just whichever it was, that's what
Yeah,
occurred to me, but that performance will fall off at that range.
absolutely. Yeah.
Is that where that's,
It's absolutely right. If we turn this up on its, made it vertical, no, how about this? Rotate it 90 degrees counterclockwise. So the highest point is up here and the lowest point is down here. I could definitely overlay the Yerkes-Dodson inverted U theory here when it comes to performance. And we could certainly say along the heart line, or if you will, or along the vertical, however you want to overlay it. This is where we're going to get optimal performance and productivity. The level of tension is too low. They would have called it sensory excitement, I think was how they described it. If it's too low, then we get performance is going to suffer. And if it gets too high, performance is going to suffer. So yeah, absolutely. And again, further out grid you go, the more intense that whole feeling is going to be. So if I said to you guys, do you think you could add a little bit of insight about intensity on top of those levels of tension to help them see things a little bit more distinctly, and maybe even ask them some follow-up questions? Yeah.
Yes.
Yay, nay? All right, good, good, good. So layer by layer, we're all doing just fine now. Now we get into this one. In-grid, out-grid, up-grid, down-grid. 9 and 11 is solidly in the out-grid quadrant. We know that all those quadrant-based personality typing systems overlay almost effortlessly on the change grid. Sometimes, rather than talking about these 4 quadrants, if you rotate it, they would say their model is more like this slice, this slice, this slice, this slice, if you can create it into a different sort of a triangle. Nevertheless, they're always going to overlay quite effortlessly. So we already know that. So do you know enough about the outgrid variety of different personality typing systems that you could say a lot of the characteristics of that personality type or what's coming forward, what's being summoned forward when you're here? That's an energy you're feeling around doing it. All right, is that something you guys could throw their way? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good, 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 good. Now we.
I personally avoid personality issues.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Preferring to believe personalities are just a fiction of probability.
Yeah, well, I agree completely. That's why we just use personality typing as a way of coming up with descriptors for what's happening based on those different energies. So we just say like, someone may very well have a personality. They've got enough pattern in the way that they think and behave that we can predict how they're likely to think and behave over a long period of time, kind of knowing them. So I get it. People do have their own personal way of living and thinking and doing whatever it is they happen to be living and thinking and doing. But those maps that they created for those personality types do overlay and they are useful. But I would certainly say to any client that this is not a personality test, but it takes the knowledge base of that personality test and applies it in a more practical kind of way. So yeah, so that's pretty much what we would do. Yeah.
So would it be correct to say, pardon me, personality is basically patterns of response?
Absolutely. I think personality is patterns, period. So the ones that we probably kind of notice the most in other people as we're determining personality is what they're, physically doing. Maybe, what they're saying, maybe the tone that they're doing, but by and large, it's still people are patterns. And for some reason, I don't know, I mean, this goes all the way back to Socrates and Plato and a bunch of others way back when they wanted to divide humanity into 4 different groups. And they might have said phlegmatic and sanguine and melancholic and what's the other body ooze? But they had some other, ooze to kind of relate to all 4 of these. And someone else was going like, oh no, these are the seasons. There's spring, summer, winter, and fall, or winter and autumn. Or no, these are the four humidity combinations of humidity and heat. So are you hot and wet? Are you hot and dry? Are you cold and wet? Are you cold and dry? So there's been countless models attempting to divide humanity into four pieces. I have to believe that anyone who developed one of those models very quickly realized that their model describes everyone and no one simultaneously. So yeah, it gives us certain glimpses, but we can also say, well, you know, they also have some contributing upgrid energy or ingrid or whatever, again, their labels happen to be. And so I would hope that anyone who was putting together any of these quadrant-based personality typing systems would have acknowledged early on that while they realize there are countless variations available throughout humanity, that it is useful to divide them into four groups so that we can learn things a little bit more generally and help us to better understand others across these broad categories. So a lot of these almost feel kind of gimmicky, but there are also now in modern days ones that would have enough variations inside of them that you could say maybe that one's more accurate. But I'll just say this: I don't believe it's a 4 type model or an 8 type model or even a 16 type model. But at a certain point in time, they're going to say the number of variables or the number of variations is just more than the average mind of a manager, who is probably the targeted student for this sort of thing, is likely to wrap their head around because of time constraints and other thought constraints, et cetera. So that would be my thought. Now, some of you on the phone or on the call right now are very fluent in different personality methodologies. So feel free to add to whatever we've been saying, whatever you'd like to add.
T, when you're processing out this slide, would you say if somebody's very far upgrid, that indicates that there's a development or a training challenge?
I would certainly say that there is, okay, to end up upgrade, what you are proclaiming to the whole world is that your level of ability is 6 or lower, 6 at best.
Right.
So you're kind of acknowledging that you don't have all of the ability. We break it into knowledge, skill, and experience, and sometimes resources. So you know, it's almost like they're admitting that. But if we just talk about upgrade in general terms, we're going to lose the nuances of being more upgrade in the upgrade quadrant versus downgrid. And obviously, we all think that you gotta have that flexibility. You have to recognize there's countless variations. Even when we come up with a change grid, we're still reducing the whole world of possibilities to 169 because we have a 13 by 13 grid. I don't know what 169 times 13 is, but if we added that importance element, now we'd have a cube. We're still creating a relatively finite number of possibilities.
2,197.
There you go, 2,197. That's way more cumbersome, but nevertheless, it's simply a finite set of an infinite, situation, an infinite reality. So yeah, so I think it's a matter of convenience and it's a matter of simplicity. I would imagine that I don't care if you're Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, anybody way back then, or anyone that's doing this kind of work today, you're doing it because you're trying to generate an income. So Socrates had to make money. Aristotle had to make money. So when they were serving their role as a pedagogue, and there they were educating these groups of young minds, et cetera, was nobody paying them? Even if you were being given room and food and shelter and whatever it is, they were still being compensated. So I think that if they were smart, and obviously they would have said, there's only so much that this mind can handle. So let me give them something that's practical but easy, and we'll go from there. And they'll now think they actually know something profound. You guys have any thoughts about that? Comments about that?
Well, there certainly is a big difference between 6, 6 and 12, 12.
Absolutely.
or 0, 12.
Yeah, exactly. And so I would hope the people who created these models recognize that, but made a conscious decision to keep things simple, approachable, practical, manageable, and still have some value. And that's why I've always thought all personality tests do have, some value in them. So take as many of them as you can, as often as you can, and that's it. Just be wary of the labels and your willingness to own the label that the model might contain. So what I found myself doing lately is if someone asks me anything about my personality or whatever, I rattle off all kinds of things. I'll say, well, in the Enneagram, I'm a 5-wing 4. So in all the quadrant-based things, I'm an analytical. I'm a Sigma, a Sigma male, and someone else then added to it the empath. I'm actually a Sigma male empath. So yeah, got to rattle it all off. And again, if we have a client we're using this with who already has a familiarity, if not a fluency, with a particular quadrant-based model, what a wonderful way for us to help them really connect with the truth of the change grid. Because if we can say to them, all that stuff you already know about those personalities, let us show you where that overlays. And now let's help you gain something that that model or your experience didn't do. We talk about now what, and so I love that all around. But primarily, we're interested in quadrant-based personality typing so that we get the adjectives that we're looking for, so we can apply the subtleties and nuances, which is really what this little series I want to do with you guys is all about. This is easy. It's easy to break the grid down layer by layer and share with people some of the insights that each independent layer has to share. But there's a whole level of reading a grid we got to play with a little bit more. So am I right? You guys could certainly talk about whatever you are aware of or use their knowledge base to help them understand what's going on with these 4 grid locations. Yeah. And yep. And again, I'm going to imagine that at this point in time, you might find it useful to refer to these instead of being types as being energies that humans experience, and all energies are available to all humans at all times. So it might be work, but nevertheless, they're available. They're available. Now, we can take it a step further and say in all the personality typing systems, they have both the upside and the downside of that personality. And so certainly when we look at someone who's out-grid, we can say some of these adjectives they're using to describe this individual are relatively negative. Like if you're an out-grid person, tell me whatever personality typing system you know, like driver, if we're talking about DISC. What's the dark side of the driver?
Too driven.
They could be too driven. What is that?
Driver, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. And so will they end up doing what as far as relationships go? As far as that, I mean, what? Yeah.
They
Throw people under
sacrifice
the bus.
relationships for the result.
Exactly. They're really more concerned about the outcome rather than the people who are involved. And we could do this. Lord knows we've spent hours and hours talking about each of these danger zones and, from one angle or another. So we can certainly say that this individual at coordinates 9 and 11 is actually on the border between a healthy way that these all get expressed and a dangerous place. So this is where, as Kathy had suggested, we would want to say some sort of a caution. I think it was Kathy that suggested that. Talk about some sort of caution.
You know what? Can I add something here that's so pertinent? Yeah, Chuck Gallagher is a speaker, and he speaks on business ethics. And this is such an example that your brain actually you can become delusional. Made a lot of money as a CPA, but spending more than he could, started embezzling. And I want to use him in one of my talks, but it's such a perfect example that in his mind, what he was doing was taking people's money, using it to buy, his Ferrari or whatever. And then he would pay it back. In his mind, it was a loan. So I think when you talk about the extremes, this is such a perfect example.
It is.
And it was working. It was working. So he didn't
course.
have any worries until somebody wanted to be paid back immediately.
Yep.
And the money wasn't there.
And then the
And
floodgate opens because news.
yes.
Yep.
And then he convinced everybody that if you want to get paid back, don't send me to jail. So he didn't go to jail because this way he could make money. He can't make money in jail,
Right.
but he did pay people back. But then the federal government, you don't pay taxes on stolen money.
Yeah.
But it's such an example how smart people do dumb things when they're too driven.
Well, and let's take a look at where that's actually happening. If you are someone that's in this outgrid danger zone, and I can give you plenty of examples. Who was our guy with the big Ponzi scheme? Madoff?
Bernie Madoff, yeah.
Bernie Madoff. Okay, he got away with it for a long time. A long time. I don't know how many years, but I remember it was a long time. Well, what has to happen to your self image or your, how do I say, the legend that you think lives within you, whatever, I don't know how to describe it. What happens to you when you go, I've got greater ability. I'm smarter than all of these people. No one has I figured out how to blah, blah, blah. But they don't underestimate the challenge. They know that what they're doing is very, very difficult, which is why more people don't do it. And so they feel like they are not a superhero, maybe a supervillain, and they're okay with being a supervillain. Let's see, Shags just said, that's how I passed the Ohio bar exam in 81 when the essays were mostly criminal cases and I was a tax and estate planning guy. I answered all with the tax implications of crime and scored points. There you go. There you
Yeah,
go.
you can't get away with it forever.
Nope.
You
Sooner or
got Al
later.
Capone on tax fraud.
Yep. And so
There's something there about that line that you're touching on in each of the zones that that says to me slippery slope.
very slippery slope. You know, again, I know we're looking at this layer by layer, but this is also out, these are outside of the red circle. It's just a different little shape, but nevertheless, the principle
Right.
remains the same. These are all literally in danger and or endangering others around them. So yeah, danger zone. So what we would do again for this individual at 9 and 11 is we would just give them a little voice of caution. This can be one of the absolute most successful places you could be, but step even a little bit further out grid, start believing your own PR, all that sort of stuff. You're going to walk into a very, very negative outcome. For you.
And especially pay attention to honesty, ethics,
Absolutely. There's
relationships.
yeah, all those in-grid kind of qualities, amiable kind of qualities, all that sort of stuff has been totally lost way out here. This individual where I'm at in the red dot, that is a driven driver. Okay, they don't notice anybody else, let alone care about anybody else. So
Yeah, there are other people.
there are other people.
Was that your foot?
Yeah, exactly. So they're willing to take risks. And here's the thing, the reason why they do it is because for a while at least, they're successful with it. So nobody becomes a narcissist because they've got nothing that they can brag about. They did something right. And unfortunately, they let whatever that was define them and ultimately kind of dangerously impact their self-perception, self-awareness, etc. Linda and I are rewatching The Gilded Age. I don't know if you guys are watching The Gilded Age. It's on HBO and the second season has just started.
Yes, I love it.
Isn't it interesting?
Yeah.
It's basically by the same guy, Fellows, who did the Downton Abbey, but it's a little bit earlier in the time frame. I think it's the U.S. in the late 1870s, 80s.
Yes.
There are people
Oh,
still
yeah.
alive that died on the Titanic. So, so yeah, I think that's it. The turn of the century. Victorian rather than Edwardian times, I would imagine. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. The point is that one of the big families, the guy takes tremendous gambles, and his gambles have paid off very well so far. So he is a big risk taker. Similarly, although he's an industrialist, similarly, his wife, who is all about entering a social world that doesn't want new money involved in it. She's as determined. So she takes all kinds of chances, but proves again and again that she has the ability. So as of this moment in the storyline, while these individuals, husband and wife, have both had their dangerous moments, so far they have prevailed and prevailed in a very, what do I want to say, kind of tremendous way. I would suspect that sooner or later there's going to be a comeuppance, but it hasn't happened so far in those two characters. Kathy, you agree with me?
Oh, absolutely. And you know, and I love studying that time in our history because it's very similar to the current day. And it's when the gap between the rich and the poor was the greatest. And it's the emergence of incredible wealth and incredible, you know, family-based wealth. And it's a frontier. It's the beginning of the industrial age. And it's fascinating. Yes, I mean, we do know that, you know, I'm not going to give away some of the story, but some of the gambles that the fellow you're talking about was making, he's gonna come up against it in that strike.
Yep.
With so, you know, with, I mean, I don't want to
agree. Yeah, I agree. I agree completely.
Yeah, and it's just, I mean, I actually have friends whose families who come from families like that.
Wow.
And those families, and it's fascinating to hear their perspective, you know, on their ancestors and in what happened and what made or broke the wealth as it comes forward. And
Yeah, no,
they're not always positive about their lineage.
absolutely. I also love it because, and again, for you guys who aren't watching it, it's on Max. It's a great thing to watch. Well worth subscribing to Max for.
No, it's actually on HBO. You don't even have
HBO Max. Yeah, it's HBO Max is where we get it because we stream it. So is it also just part of regular HBO for HBO subscribers?
Yeah.
There you go. All right. Anyway, it's really a good thing to watch on multiple levels because it also shows you the evolution of values in America, in society, in whatever, because 150 years ago, I promise you, the values that they lived by were very different than any of the values we even talked about with Koch coming up, or what was his name? Yeah, Cole. Suggested. So anyway, well worth watching. All right, now going back to this, can I rest comfortably knowing that you guys would see that this is an area where a message of caution might need to be given and discussed? Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. So you're doing really well, layer by layer by layer by layer. Let's kind of go to this one now. You know that almost all 4-type models either did or could have created 4 hybrids at the borders between their 4 quadrants. And that's exactly what's happened here. How do you turn a 4-type model into an 8-type model? Well, this is no one model. We just pulled different labels from a bunch of different 8-type models to do this, but the words will still resonate. Leader is outgrid, energizer is upgrid, follower is ingrid, thinker is downgrid. These are obvious overlays for us. Well, what do you really call someone who's in between leader and energizer? What's someone who's got a lot of leader ingredients, but some energizer as well? Well, that's where this influencer came into play. Or how about a leader? They got that energy going for them, but they've also got a big contribution of thinker energy. What's halfway between a thinker and a leader? What's the transition? And that's the advocator. Enough thought has been given to something that someone has now seen an opportunity, seen a problem. They've obviously moved upgrid, but up and out a little bit because they're trying to, well, advocate for whatever it is that's going on. They're trying to be the reformer, is a name for this in another model. That's that leader energy saying, don't just know it, have some thoughts about it, bring it forward, give us the message, whatever. Then the leader could take it, start preaching it, get a whole bunch of influencers to awaken all the energy in everybody else. So these in-between sections, I think, are really interesting stopping points to understand personality and to understand the energies that people are experiencing. Halfway between energizer and follower, I've got that follower who's excited, so they like to help. They're ready to step up and do what they can do. And on the down grid kind of side of things, halfway between follower and thinker, I'm really not in charge of anything, and they really aren't my thoughts, but this guy gets real sloppy and careless, and this one's got too much stuff on her plate or whatever. She's lost in thought or whatever. We need to figure out some administrative things. So that to me is the person who recognizes the thinker does their best when they're allowed to think, but there's stuff that needs to be taken care of. And none of it is upgrid and none of it is outgrid, but it needs to be done. And so that follower energy becomes the administrator kind of type. And by the way, it might be administration in terms of business, office work, etc. But I think these are also the people who are keeping the thinker socially involved, active, doing some self-care. This is the person who's arranging all those things. Because the thinker gets lost in their thought and none of that matters. They end up in a downgrade danger zone sooner or later.
Parenting.
Well, there you have it. There you have it. So yeah, lots of different examples scattered all around. And so I think, although this is not one of the primary layers we tend to talk to someone about, if they do have an 8-type model, I could see pulling that out. I can also use this to transition to more information about different energies people might be experiencing. So not all points along this ability scale are experienced the same when tension is high, when tension is low, or when tension is even moderate. So things are going to change. And what we're trying to do as we lead people through these layers in the way I'm doing it right now is for you to see there's a dynamic element. There are layers of subtlety that could be factored in to, better, what am I say, accurately describe that individual's experience of that particular situation. Ugh. Okay. So could you guys throw in a little bit, even just using these words? Do you interpret these words, you think, well enough to throw something into the discussion?
I think so.
So 9 and 11, well, you're in that, I can use this language now. We talked about upgrade. So I can say, you're in that upgrade kind of piece of leader. So there's that influence kind of thing that might be coming into play a little bit, but mostly you're still just pushing the initiative, moving the initiative. And just like we learned in, upgrade, people start feeling more of a sense of urgency. You got a little bit of that, a sense of urgency going on, but you got definitely that leader kind of energy. So tell me a little bit about who's advocating for this, who's your influencer, who's supporting you, and in these other different areas. So I could use it to engage them in some dialogue about the different players that might be helping them get to where they're going. Okay, do you guys feel confident that if you just had a coordinate pair and this layer, you could tell them something? Yeah?
Yes.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah.
Good. All right, then we go like, but you know what? People weren't satisfied with only 8. And so a lot of times, by the way, someone would add the middle. That would be the balance type, even if it was just a 4 type thing. The fifth type, if you saw, as you go from a 4 type to a 5 type, all you're doing is adding the middle. And as you move from an 8 type to a 9 type, all you're doing is adding the balanced middle. So yeah, now if we move to the next layer, now we have 16. Now, I think it's important to know that if you've got someone who's Myers-Briggs fluent, that they might have issue with this, whatever the driven driver equivalent is, probably an EST, no, No, ESTJ probably would be out there, I would imagine. Anyway, you get the idea. They don't know, and it's too much for them to know at this point that not all models stretch to all the corners. Truly, Myers-Briggs needs to be compressed a little bit so that its corners, if you look at these, just touch that danger zone. So their idea of this ESTJ, I think is what it would be. You know, they're not necessarily in a danger zone. This is a good energy, a good personality. Anyway, but we can say like we're viewing these as energies. And so every activity has a certain level of energy at which it's ideally performed, most effortlessly performed. Other activities, it really all it could be very problematic. And so you plotted at coordinates 9 and 11. Now, you are in that outgrid quadrant we talked about before. We labeled that outgrid quadrant as the driver energy. And what that means is blah, blah, blah. And now, before I explain secondary energies, I want to talk about primary energies, working my way around so that I am better mapping to something we've already talked about, so they can see how these things overlay very effortlessly. So I'll go ahead and explain expressive primary energy is this, amiable primary energy is blah, 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 analytical primary energy, blah, blah, blah. But you know what? All driver energies, all expressive or amiable or analytical energies are not created equally. So we can break this down into the grid inside of the grid, the quadrant inside of the quadrant, and better understand what's going on by looking at a secondary energy. So there is an expressive driver, and that's how this is different, because what does the expressive energy want? What did we say out here, down here? I'm not asking you guys to, we've done this so many times. I'm hoping everything I'm saying is really just review. Am I right? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so now we get to this situation, coordinates 9 and 11. What are you going to say?
Well, they're on the borderline between an expressive driver and a driven driver. So there's a little bit of an internal battle going on between accomplishing the task and promoting the task.
Ah, very good, very good. Accomplishing the task, promoting the task, accomplishing the task. What else does the expressive driver want? Do they want things sooner or later?
Well, that's where the narcissist lives. So I would caution them to be considerate of other people's opinions
There you
before
go.
taking action.
Right, because this driver energy, and if I add things up, I've got two primaries and a secondary driver energy. So I know who's running the boat. I know who's, driving the bus. But there's this energy, as David's pointed out, that's expressive. It's trying to keep things positive, forward moving, energized, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, that's what's going on there. So this is the first layer we look at where there are some subtleties and nuances we might want to better understand. And we're going to play with that in detail in just a second. Am I right? Did you guys know enough about these four primary and secondary energies that if someone has an activity plotting in one of them, near one of them, whatever, that you are able to share something that would be meaningful and insightful for them as far as that activity is concerned? Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So we get to the next one. This is the engagement rings. And so this is answer. Remember, we say the change grid is designed to answer four questions. How ready is this person to do what needs to be done? How engaged are they in doing it? How likely are they to follow through and do what needs to be done? And what type and level of support are they going to require? So that's what it's going to do. Well, this particular layer focuses on the engagement part of things. And so we could take a moment and explain to them about each one of these different bands of it, or we could go to coordinates 9 and 11, which is very much in execution. So as far as this activity is concerned, you are executing on that. Luckily, you're on that border we talked about before. so that you're not executing the people that are involved or not executing the opportunity altogether. You are just out there killing it. You know, you're making it happen in a nice, positive kind of way. Watch out for the dark side of execution. It gets bloody at a certain point. So are you guys feel comfortable that if you had an activity plot and execution, you could give them some insights or engagement, intention, awareness? Yeah?
Yeah.
Yes.
And could you make some distinctions perhaps between plotting more up-grid rather than down-grid inside of the bands? Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, all right, good. I'm really thrilled. Now we get to the last layer we're going to be looking at in this stack. And these are the layers that are going to talk about radial trends on the change grid. So we say that we want to be inside the green circle. If we're not at the exact center, then we're going to be imbalanced, right? But it's only 1 degree of being out of balance. It's just leaning a particular way, leaning out grid or up grid, in grid, down grid. As we move outside of the green circle and enter the area between the green and the red, now that feeling of being out of balance, or that fact of you being out of balance, is getting more pronounced. So 2nd degree imbalance. You're going to feel these things more powerfully, blah, blah, blah. If you plot outside of the red circle, you already know that to be in the danger zone. Then that's way out of balance. That's something you have to get back into balance, or at least prepare yourself to ride that level of imbalance to whatever conclusion it has to be ridden. And so again, if your coordinates 9 and 11, look at where you are. Look at, what would you guys say about that particular location as far as this layer is concerned?
It's bordering on the unhealthy.
It's bordering on the unhealthy. In fact, it might even be tipping its toe into that side of things, you know, subtleties and nuances. And so what might you, you know, ask them, encourage them, say to them, whatever?
We need to find a way to reduce the challenge.
Because if we could reduce the challenge by just 1 point, look where we'd be. Or if I could simultaneously reduce the challenge and increase ability, then look where I'm at. I'm in the best place possible. What I don't want to do is take you here and then make you feel like you've got even more ability. Because what happens if I make just this one subtle movement from here to there? All I've done is increase your perceived ability by 1 point. Am I helping the situation or hurting the situation?
Hurting the situation. Because they're going to start disregarding and being aware of factors that will impact the overall quality of the decision.
There you go. But I could easily manipulate them. I could certainly say to them, you know, I don't think you really realize how talented you are. I don't know if you really understand how remarkable it is that you can handle this situation. You're a trailblazer, you're a whatever. As I start to just give them feedback that somehow or another gives them an inflated sense of their ability to do what's going on, am I hurting or helping their situation?
Hurting.
I'm hurting it. I'm hurting it. So now if they were in here, let's say they were at coordinates 9 and 10. And I said to them, you know, I think you're the right person for this task. This is something you seem to really understand. Can you see how that would actually be useful if my goal is to move them to the most productive place on the change grid, deliberate, calculated, productive place? That message is good, but deliver it to someone who has a higher perceived level of challenge, I could be getting them into trouble. All right, so
Yeah, things like I've got your back, or you have the authority to do what you need to do. Those kinds of things that encourage them to realize, okay, now I have more ability.
And stroke their ego. We're counting on you. We know you can do it. You know, all that kind of stuff. We can actually move someone into a dangerous place where, again, if they were plotting here, I'd want to lower their perceived challenge and then maybe increase their perceived ability, not the other way around. Don't boost their ability and then think you're going to correct their perceived challenge to a healthier place on the change grid. Understand what we're talking about here? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to work our way through this to get to this particular slide and that particular coordinate pair so that I'd be able to say to you, the real art of reading a change grid is in the subtleties and nuances. It's not in your ability to, share whatever quick reference guide or, stuff we keep saying over and over again about each of these different physical locations. Yes, there's value in all that, but that's something quite candidly that can be automated. And as I play more and more with ChatGPT, I realize how about this? How soon it will be very easy to automate what I'm going to refer to as a brainless read. I did not design this tool with a thought that a computer would ever be able to spit out a reading. And I still question whether or not that's something I would want the world to be able to do. I believe that a change grid can only be read, or can best be read, by a trained human who possesses equal amounts of intelligence and intuition. And so it's in these subtleties that I think we have the opportunity to show our value beyond the relative obvious set of descriptors. I mean, good grief, I could reduce their learning curve to nothing and just say, here's a complete map of adjectives that describes exactly what's going on everywhere. Well, if they think that's all there is to it, then I would suggest to you that they're not going to have as great a result, an outcome, as they would if they were working with someone who understands subtleties and nuances. Yeah, you guys agree, disagree?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Hopefully you're right.
Yeah, well, that's it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I never, yeah, I just don't think that giving someone a boilerplate explanation of a particular area on the change grid is going to be useful. Now, go right ahead. Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, I think the value for me has always been of the change grid is its ability to move people beyond the boxes of their typologies and give them control over how to use their energy.
That's right.
So that is really what you're doing. I mean, it's useful to know what typologies are there because a lot of us have been raised to look at ourselves typologically, but given how rigid and invaluable that can be over time, that change grid's value is in the freedom to use energy effectively and understand that you can be much more than whatever your typology tells you you are.
That's right. Exactly right.
And for me, it's been a great tool in getting feedback from people that I can then use to hone in on what it is that's really bothering them and help them clear it out.
Mhm.
Right? To help them move forward in that way, because I use it more, more coaching therapeutically.
Yeah. Yep. Perfect. All right. So are you guys ready then for the big look or the big point of this? The big point of this is what happens if I'm somewhere on the change grid that has an intersection that's in all these places at once, because that's always the case. And so if I'm at coordinates 9 and 11, look at all the different layers of information that, yeah, I could go through one by one, but can you combine all those insights into a single statement or into, an insight that would encapsulate all that stuff at once? You know what I mean, jelly beans?
Yep.
So, I mean, 9 and 11, 9 and 11 is here. Sorry. Though this would be 8 and 11, 9 and 11. Yeah. I'm in power. I get that. Yeah, I'm in the outgrid quadrant. I'm on the border of a danger zone.
Very engaged while you're
Very engaged.
acting. Yeah.
I got some leader energy going on there because of the 8 little bands. But I'm really more of a enthusiastic leader and a brass tacks kind of leader. I really am more of that expressive driver, driven driver kind of thing. So that's going on. And I'm ever so slightly outside of the red thing. So I am in a dangerous area based on that layer. This whole thing, anything outside of the red circle is danger. Even coordinates 12 and 6 and 6 and 12 and all these are still areas of danger, mostly because there's nobody out there who possesses zero ability or faces zero challenge, or 12 ability, 12 challenge on anything at any time. I mean, they might rate it that way, but we know when someone uses zeros or 12s, or they have a pattern of doing it frequently, do we think we're looking at a logical assessment and the result of that, careful consideration, or is it just an,
What about a man giving birth?
well, there you go.
No,
It's
no
it's
ability,
dysfunction.
and there's no
Right.
challenge to it.
That's right. That's right. And so, this is what we really are saying, that with rare exception, obviously, we can come up with some things. But my point is that unless there is one of those circumstances, we're looking at someone's immediate emotional reaction to the activity as presented before them. So whenever someone is going like, oh, my ability to do that is a 12, and they do that for 6 or 7 different items, who among you have met someone that you believe has got 6 or more things in their life that they have absolutely perfected? No room for improvement at all. Is that real?
Not many.
No, they might perceive themselves as being a 12, but we know that more often than not, what they have done is overestimated, overrepresented their ability. Or if they're going to give themselves a 12 because they need to get a report finished by next Monday for challenge. Do you believe that a report that's due next Monday is worthy of a 12 for challenge? Or is that an emotional response to thinking about the activity?
Probably an emotional response.
Yeah. Now, I won't argue if they gave themselves an 11. That may very well be an 11. I'm not worried about that. But if they say, well, my ability is 0 and the challenge is an 11, really, your ability is 0 to get the report ready. How about you don't feel like you got much ability, but could you give yourself at least a 1? And we know the challenge isn't a 12, it's an 11. Okay, this position on the change grid is still a horrible place to be, which is why we don't argue with a client who's giving us the emotional responses. It's just us recognizing that a 0 or a 12 is very likely to be someone's emotional reaction to the question rather than the careful, thoughtful, considerate evaluation that they put themselves through. You guys do you think that's fair enough more often than not, or not?
Can you prevent that by explaining the rating system more thoroughly?
I've never been able to. And I don't know that I
No.
would want to, because if they're having an immediate emotional response to it, even though their plotting may be slightly off kilter, if we give themselves a 0-12, I'm just going to make them a 1-11. That's all. I'm just going to reduce things 1 little point to what's going on. So that doesn't change things energetically really all that much. But the fact that they gave themselves a 12 for challenge makes me want to go, I wonder if they stopped at 12 because there weren't any numbers beyond it. They might think it's a 15, a 20. I want to explore that with them. So I'd say a 12 is a very interesting response for perception. Tell me what makes it feel like a 12. Or tell me what makes it feel so challenging, and see what they give me from that. So I'm glad when I see those things, because it shows me where their actual, well, tension lies on the one hand, but could also be where their drive lies. If they gave themselves a 12 and a 12, what did they just tell me by giving themselves a 12 and a 12? They told me more than if they just give themselves an 11-11. And it's beyond the assessment. They're telling me something emotionally that's going on here too.
I'm the only one that can do this.
That's right. That's right. The
And
superhero.
it simply must be done.
Exactly. It has to be done. And I am the only one who can do it. And all of you must revere me accordingly for the rest of forever. You know, so there's stuff going on here when I see a 0 and 12 that I don't want to stop from happening. I'm still receiving very useful insights and information. It just means I need to process it with them in a different kind of a way. You know, I would like to think that no one on this call today has ever experienced a true activity that has an experience of 12. So, because what does that mean? If I said in the world of possibilities, 12 is reserved for a certain group of events, of activities, of situations. Yeah, how many of you would hope that in your lifetime you never have to encounter any of those? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
No, but
Yeah.
I don't want those on, I don't want to wish those on anybody. And so I get it. Life may feel like it's a 12, but we know that relatively speaking, we may not even be able to fathom what an actual 12 is. Yeah. Or having zero ability to do something. Really. Anyway, I've made my point. So I want the data, but
Well, I think though that maybe people who are in the capacity where they need to act to save someone's life
yes. Would be where?
would be there. Would that be about right?
Would be at 12, 12 or 0,
Yes.
12?
Yes.
Well, at 12.
Yeah, I'm 3 stories up. I have to dive into the into the river or whatever, you know,
Yeah.
and all of that. But I'm going to do it because it has to be done.
Yeah, and that's fine because this is a person who's either going to do it or die trying.
Right.
And there may be certain events in life where that is the appropriate level of energy. But let's say that I am in a life or death situation and I am lying on an operating room table. You have a choice between a doctor who's at 12:12, a doctor who is at 11:11, a doctor at 10:10, and a doctor at 9:9. Which surgeon do you want performing your surgery?
10-10.
10:10. Why not 11:11? Why not 12:12?
Because they may lose awareness and make a mistake.
Because what's driving their error?
Too much ability.
They perceive themselves as having more ability than they actually
Required, yeah.
did. And so that's it. I don't want a 12:12 operating on me. I don't really want an 11:11. Maybe I want an 11:11 driving the ambulance to get to the hospital.
well, if you remember the 10 codes from the CV days, 1010 is fight in progress.
Right, there you go. There you go. Right.
Interesting.
Yep. So that's it. So again, what we're looking at now are the subtleties and nuances of what's going on there. So with our next call on Thursday, which by the way, I think we could wrap it up on that one. I just want to be able to throw some coordinate pairs at you guys and give you a specific activity and see what would you say if you were right here, if you were reading through all the layers of the change grid. How would you either encapsulate what's going on here or hit highlights for each one of those? How do you handle the subtleties and nuances of what's going on? Yeah. All righty. Questions, comments?
Fascinating as
Good
always.
stuff.
All righty. Okay. All right.
That's a new consideration to me. And as we were going through this, T, I had an idea that I wanted to share with y'all. And that, you know, you go to the gym or something and you see these things that they do push-ups on or they stand on or whatever, that they've got a round, soft bottom so that they rock,
Yep.
right?
Those
And
who-
the idea is to stay square on it.
Yep.
Well, imagine that the change grid was printed on that top that you're looking at.
That part of it. Yep. Absolutely right.
It'd be very interesting to the earlier conversation about keeping things in balance.
That's right. So if you're standing on there's a half Bosu ball, that's the one that's got the flat side to it. If you're standing up there, people will use it to work on their core to see if they can really get their balance. And
There you go.
you're watching, they might be wiggling a little bit one way or another in these directions. But what do you think happens if they lean too far? You know, they're going to fall off of the thing.
Oop.
And when you get good at the center of the change grid, it's amazing, sticking with Daniel's metaphor there, that these people can pick up dumbbells. They can pick up kettlebells. They can start doing things like squats and all sorts of other behaviors because they're so accustomed to being balanced. So, okay. So thanks again, everybody. We will pick up where we left off next time. Bye for now.
Have a good day,
Hey,
everyone.
thank you.
Bye.
Y'all have a good one. Bye now.